Everybody's got their pitchforks and torches. There's mobs in the streets of Sacramento after the Kings lost to the Portland Trailblazers 115 to 106 tonight. Everybody looking for the person to blame. So you know what? Let's do it here too. Welcome to the Blame Game on the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News here in Sacramento. And I hope you had a good Thanksgiving dinner because Black Friday was sure ruined by the Sacramento Kings tonight. I was in a good mood today, man. I got some great Black Friday deals. I got 3 new pairs of Nikes today. I got my Christmas shopping done. I was in a great mood. And then the Sacramento Kings started playing basketball. Or actually, I was in a great mood through most of the first quarter. Then the second quarter started. And then it just kept getting worse and worse and worse to where, once again, the day after a holiday, the Sacramento Kings get their ass kicked by the Portland Trailblazers. It happened the day after Christmas last year. Kings lost big in Portland. And don't be fooled by the fact that the Kings only lost by 9, because they should have lost this game by 15 plus. The Kings were straight up beat by the Portland Trailblazers today on the day after Thanksgiving. So, who are we going to blame? Let's play the blame game. And I think you'll understand where I'm coming from or where I'm trying to get to by the end of this blame game. But who do we pick? Mike Brown and his coaching staff. Kings head coach Mike Brown and his coaching staff. You somehow took the best offense in the NBA in your first season here in Sacramento. You barely got any time to work with them. You got hired here, you got your hands on this new roster, and you put out one of the best offenses the NBA has ever seen. In fact, it was the best at that time. You ended the playoff drought. You were the unanimous coach of the year, and somehow with time and this group primarily still together, you've made it worse. You've gone from the best offense to can't even get close to that offense again at this point. Mike's message was, we need to play better defense to actually win in the playoffs. There's no use in getting to the playoffs and being this high-tempo offensive team because you're going to lose and you have to win on the defensive end of the playoffs. Mike Brown said he has no interest getting to the postseason and being a first-round flameout because you're an offensively gifted team that struggles with the defensive uptick in the playoffs. Well, guess what, Mike? You can't even make the playoffs at this point. You haven't been back because your offense has not been nearly good enough to get you back there, and the defense of this roster is never going to be great. It's just not. What else? Okay, well, Matt, the offense is struggling because the first year, the Kings caught teams by surprise, and now teams are no longer surprised by the Kings and are preparing for the Kings and understand the Kings' DHO-heavy option offense, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you might be right. But how about you adjust to the adjustments that they've made for you? Or are you just a one-dimensional team that only found the one way that it could work, and now that teams are taking that one way away, you have no idea where to go, so you just try and keep banging your head against the same wall until hopefully you have a breakthrough, but clearly, consistently, you are not able to do so at this point. Back-to-back blowout losses on the day after holidays in Portland. That's one thing. But here we are, early in the season, and the Kings have lost to the Hawks, who are 9-11. The Kings, and at home too, by the way, the Kings have lost to the Brooklyn Nets, who are 9-11, at home, by the way. The Kings have lost to the Raptors, who are 5-12, and now the Kings have lost to the Portland Trailblazers, who after tonight are 8-12 on the season. So the struggles from last year of you laying an egg against bad teams, laying an egg against teams that are below you in the standings, laying an egg against teams, especially in the East, with how much weaker the East is than the West. It's not an insult, it's a fact. The East is weak compared to the West, and those weak Eastern Conference teams keep beating you every single year. Why? It's a consistent problem. Why can this team not show up and handle their business on games that they're absolutely supposed to? Why can't they do it? And here you are with this roster. We talked about the roster defensively has a cap, right? Looking at this roster, we know defensively this team is not going to be good based off their personnel. But the amount of freaking shooters on this team that have suddenly just forgotten how to shoot the basketball. As much as I would like to blame Kangs and blame it on these universal forces that hate Sacramento and don't want anything to happen and don't want any fun here, as much as I want to blame it on them, how, Mike Brown and coaching staff, have you managed to take this roster filled with shooters and make them all terrible at the same time? How? It does not make sense. Okay, we'll blame Mike Brown. Why don't we blame the entire Kings locker room? Why don't we start going down the list of players, right? Let's start with Keegan Murray. Well, actually, all the players, you are the ones on the court that keep making the same mistakes over and over and over and over again, and you don't need and shouldn't need your coach and coaching staff to write it on a clipboard for you and show it to you while it's happening every single time. You're going through it again. You've been through it before. Deal with it. Overcome it. But you can't. Keegan Murray is broken. Keegan, what has happened? Like, what has happened? And love Keegan, right? I cannot be called a Keegan Murray hater on this podcast. I cannot be called a Keegan Murray hater, period. I've defended that man to the end of the earth, and I will still stand in front of him and say what he's doing on the defensive end is pretty solid, and he's improved as a rebounder. But Keegan Murray has fallen off the face of the earth offensively, completely fallen off. Tonight, 3 points, which he scored in garbage time, on 1 of 9 shooting from the field, 1 of 6 from three-point range. 20 games in, and you're shooting this poorly pretty much every single game. That's not a slump anymore. We're getting into who you are this season territory, right? Keegan has had that amazing season as a rookie where he exploded on the scene, has the NBA record for three-pointers made in his rookie season, right? This catch and shoot specialist. And since that point, while the offensive numbers went up last season, the shooting has been on a steady decline and has now, boom, plummeted to the bottom of the Grand freaking Canyon. The dude just cannot shoot, and it doesn't make sense why. You're in the 3rd year of your career, and you're 24 years old. You're not 21, 22 anymore, in your first year where the game is too fast for you. You're not a kid. You got to step up. The Kings need you to step up, and you're not doing it. I know you're handling a lot, right? Kyle Madsen made a really, really, really good point on Twitter. I know you're handling a lot, but if you are labeled as a star caliber two-way player that the Kings believe you are, but you can't do anything offensively, and you've fallen off the face of the earth offensively because of how much you're focusing on the defensive end of the floor, so because you're emphasizing one of the two ways, the other way is falling off, that doesn't make you a two-way player. That makes you one-dimensional. Just pick what dimension you want. You're not playing like a two-way player. You're certainly not playing like a star caliber two-way player that the Kings didn't just expect you to be. They need you to be if they're going to have any hope of actually competing for a championship. But beyond Keegan Murray, the inconsistent Kings role players, period. Go down the list. Tonight, you got 15 points off the bench from everybody not named Malik Monk, right? I'm not going to give you the full points off the bench because Malik had 29 of them, I think. Pretty sure Malik had 29. Like, the bench is consistently not giving you anything. And then you have your key role players. Keon Ellis struggled tonight. Kevin Huerter got hurt. I don't want to hear a damn thing about injuries in this game, though. I know DeMar DeRozan didn't play. I know Trey Lyles is out. I know the Kings have dealt with a lot of injuries so far this season. De'Aaron Fox is playing hurt with his fingers all taped together. Domantas Sabonis gets hit in the face every game. Blah, 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 blah. I don't want to care about hear about injuries, and I don't, quite frankly, care tonight because you still had Fox, Sabonis, Murray, Malik Monk off the bench. You still had 4 of your top 5 players against a Portland team that was missing Jeremy Grant, their best scorer, that was missing Scoot Henderson, their future star, that was missing Robert Williams III, one of their best defensive players, and on top of that, Matisse Thybulle, who was out too, who's typically a good defender that bothers the Sacramento Kings at times. Some of the top players on Portland, a bad team, were missing, and you still lost to them. Not just lost to them, you got straight up beat by them. So players, we got to look at you. We got to look at you. I mean, for God's sake, Fox, Sabonis, and Monk, the 3 of the 4 stars that played tonight, scored 72 points. The rest of the team scored 34. Y'all not doing your job. But while we're at it, Fox, Monk, Sabonis combined for 15 of the Kings' 20 turnovers tonight. Now, I understand a lot of that's coming from the fact that they have to create because nobody around them is freaking hitting shots and they feel like they have to do everything, and they probably do have to do everything, but they got to take care of the basketball. So do not allow yourself to look at the points and say, wow, Fox, Monk, and Sabonis did their job and didn't get any help, because they did not take care of the basketball at all tonight, and it was a problem from start to freaking finish. Even when the Kings were playing somewhat well in the first quarter, they were not taking care of the basketball. And when 15 of those 20 turnovers, literally 3/4 of your turnovers, fall on your top 3 guys, yeah, that is a big problem. But how about beyond that? You're the leaders. So lead, right? And I'm not just talking about by example, because I know De'Aaron Fox is a leader by example. I know Domantas Sabonis is a leader by example. Malik Monk talked about after the Oklahoma City Thunder loss, he said in the locker room in interviews that, he was going to say something. There's more of a veteran team now, so he was going to speak up and say something. Fox was going to speak up and say something. Sabonis was going to speak up and say something. Well, how about showing it on the court? You say you're saying things behind closed doors, and I believe a lot of that does have to stay behind closed doors. I don't want the drama of this Kings locker room to be aired out publicly like the Philadelphia freaking 76ers right now. But I would like to see, when the Kings are falling into the same rabbit hole that they have multiple times over the last couple of seasons, especially last season, losing to a bad team, coming out flat, being out-muscled, out-hustled by a worse team after a holiday or in a game that they should be winning against a short-handed team. They fall into these same mistakes, fall into these same rabbit holes, things start spiraling, and they don't do anything. I should say they do stuff leading by example on the court, but at what point, and I know this isn't who they are, but at what point is Fox or Sabonis or Monk going to grab somebody by the collar and go, yo, we need to stop doing this? Mike Brown has shared a story multiple times that has always stuck with me, and I've talked about it on this podcast before. I'll share it again. He talks about his time when he had a young LeBron James in Cleveland, and I understand that we're talking about LeBron, arguably the best player of all time, but what this story is about has nothing to do with LeBron's skill level and has everything to do with LeBron's leadership. Mike was talking about how this young Cavaliers team, all training camp and offseason, was working on this style of defense, right? They hit it hard. This is who we're going to be defensively. Early on in the season, they're struggling. They're in a game where they're getting their ass kicked on the defensive end of the floor. And Mike calls a timeout and looks at his team and goes, guys, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And LeBron steps up and goes, F that. This is who we are. We've been working on this. This is the kind of defensive team we are. And then he looked and pointed at different guys and said, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. That Cavaliers team went on to be one of the best defensive teams in the league that year. So I'm not saying that De'Aaron Fox pointing to everybody and go, you do this, you do this, you do this, is suddenly going to make the Sacramento Kings a fantastic basketball team. But there's got to be some leadership from your top guys. And I know these guys aren't mic'd up. I'm not around them 24/7. I'm sure there are conversations going on the bench or in the locker room or outside of the practice facility or wherever. There are leadership conversations happening between those top guys and the rest of the team. But in the moment when you know what is hitting the fan, I need to see that from these guys, and I'm still not seeing it. And it's been a question of these top guys their entire time here in Sacramento, and that includes De'Aaron Fox. Demand better. So we've played the blame game. I've blamed Mike Brown and the coaches. I've blamed De'Aaron Fox and the players. Why don't we blame the front office too while we're at it? Hey, Monty McNair. Hey, bud. This team just is getting worse. You have clear problems from last season that you refuse to address. And I like the moves that you made. I like bringing in DeMar DeRozan. It should be working better than it is, but the reality is it's not working. That's on you. But you know you have deficiencies and inefficiencies with this team. You have a clear disconnect with what you're saying you need and what your head coach is saying publicly that you need. This team is not good. It's not. And at some point, Monty's got to wear that, and I'm sure he already is, and Monty's a great guy, and Monty's not going to hide from anything, and Monty's not going to claim that it's anybody else's fault. He'll take ownership of it. I'm not accusing Monty of that. But this front office not only didn't address some of the defensive needs and length and physicality issues that this team still struggles with, Monty drafted a rookie that is not playing and not able to help this team because he's out until January at least, while you have Dalton Connect and these other rookies on good teams making an impact. I'm not saying Devin Carter was a bad draft pick because we don't know. We haven't seen the guy play, but the Kings are in a win now mode right now, and they went out and drafted a player that can't help them win right now when they're in a big slump to start this season. And by the time Devin Carter comes back, the Kings might be in too deep a hole to crawl out of, even if Devin Carter is a star player all of a sudden. Monty's got to look in the mirror too. So there we go. We blame the front office, we blame the players, we blame the coaching staff. I think my point is everybody's to blame. This is not a one guy is the problem. This is not a Kevin Huerter is the problem, or Keegan Murray is the problem, or Mike Brown's the problem, or Monty McNair is the problem. This entire organization needs to look in the mirror and go, we are screwing up. We're underperforming. We are not playing to the caliber that we're playing. We have not addressed clear issues with this roster, just expected them to go away. DeMar DeRozan, as good as he is, cannot just save us because he changes how we play to some extent. We are not who we are or who we were, and we've lost our identity. We don't even know who we are anymore. All we know is that we are inconsistent as hell. Everybody needs to look in the mirror with this Kings team right now. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Skylight Frames. Look, it's the holiday season, but sometimes families aren't all together, right? Maybe you're missing someone who lives on the other side of the country or miles away that you just unfortunately can't see during these holiday times. I have a cousin, someone I'm very close to. She's basically my sister. She lives all the way in North Carolina, right? She and I are super, super close, but I don't get to see her much during the holidays. But I got her a skylight frame, and I'm very excited to give this to her on Christmas because this is a frame that's going to sit on her dresser or wherever she decides to put it. And I can send her photos of myself, my family, my 3-year-old son. I can send her photos at any time and share those photos with her from hundreds of miles away. I add them straight from my phone. It's one of the many incredible features on these Skylight digital frames that don't stick out like a sore thumb like some of these other digital frames do. They come in different styles, different looks. They look natural in your home, and every single time you look at it, you'll see the slideshow of pictures of your loved ones or whatever, pictures of whatever interests you have. And you might even be surprised. You walk into the room, look at your frame, boom, there's a new picture from someone who has access to that frame who can send those pictures in at any time. The touchscreen is a game changer. It's futuristic. It is modern. You can swipe through photos at any time, tap to see which photos that were sent, new photos, old photos, different categories of photos. There are different sizes to choose from, and it's way better than social media, right? Instead of sifting through and trying to find your favorite picture on Instagram of your niece or nephew or whatever, they're sent to you. They're right there, and you can see them, have them in your background, have them in your backdrop, have a piece of your family with you or whatever you're interested in with you at all times. And now we have a special limited time offer for Locked On Kings listeners. Get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NBA. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/LockedOnNBA. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/LockedOnNBA. Part of the frustration with watching this team is the frustration of being wrong. And I'll admit it. I thought this Sacramento Kings team was going to be really good. I was talking about this Kings team with the potential to win 50 games. with the potential to make a deep playoff run. Who's going to stop this team? This offense is going to be dynamic and unstoppable. DeMar DeRozan addresses the biggest weakness of this team, even from 2 years ago when they were the best offense in the NBA. You remember all that? Yeah, I said it. I talked about it a lot here on Locked On Kings. I don't hide from it. I own it. But the frustrating reality is, at this point, while there's still so much season to go, that might be true, but we have had more than a healthy enough sample size to determine that the Sacramento Kings are not a good basketball team. They're not. Mike Brown, when he first came here to Sacramento, said it's easy to go from bad to good. It's hard to go from good to great. Well, last season, we saw how hard it was to go from good to great. This season, we're seeing how easy it is to start to trickle back from good to bad again. This Kings team is not good. They're 12th in the West, barely above the Portland Trail Blazers. Barely. And now, 2 games this season, you've split games against Portland. You beat them once, you lost to them once. What does that tell you? That tells you that the Kings belong just 1 spot ahead of Portland. If they can't, how can they claim they're a way better team than Portland when they are barely ahead of them in the standings and have only won one of their 2 games against them? They can't, because they're not. If they're better, it's slightly. Because the reality is, it doesn't matter how much more talent you have, or the names on your roster, or the accomplishments of your roster. What matters is wins and losses and how you play. And the Sacramento Kings do not play like a winning basketball team. They've completely forgotten how to shoot. I mean, we touched on it and kind of joked about it when talking about the blame game from Mike Brown. This team cannot shoot. This isn't a cold stretch anymore. This is who the team is. It's time to accept it. The Sacramento Kings are not a good three-point shooting team. This is who they are. And until they show us otherwise, that is what we should believe them to be. No more being surprised by it. We can still 100% be frustrated by it, but no more being surprised by it. No more, the law of averages says they'll even out eventually. I don't give a damn about the law of averages. What I'm seeing on the court is a team that cannot consistently knock down shots, and therefore they're hamstringing themselves and hamstringing their offense. And here's the thing. Every single team comes into games against the Sacramento Kings, one, with the confidence that they can shoot lights out from three-point range. The Portland Trail Blazers are one of the worst offensive teams in the NBA. In fact, I think they're 30th in the NBA coming into tonight's game in offensive rating. One of the worst offensive teams in the NBA. They just hung 115 on your butt. Right? On top of that, and that's nothing new, we know teams have come in, especially into the Golden One Center, know I'm going to shoot lights out tonight because the Kings' three-point defense is non-existent. I'm basically taking warm-up jumpers. But now, on top of that, teams are coming into games against the Kings with confidence defensively, because even with DeMar DeRozan out there, who's a nightmare to deal with, and De'Aaron Fox out there, who's basically unguardable, and Domantas Sabonis, who is a physical beast in the paint, all I have to do is pack the paint and dare the Sacramento Kings to beat me from three-point range, because you know what? They can't. They've proven that they can't. They haven't shown an ability to be able to do that. So I'm taking that gamble every single night until they show me that it's a bad gamble to take. Teams are confident against the Kings on both ends of the floor because of one issue with this team that we knew existed, the three-point defense, and one issue with the team that is totally perplexing, doesn't make an ounce of sense. And yet the three-point shooting is just who this Kings team is at this point. And not only were they outplayed tonight, they are getting outworked consistently. That's what I said at the beginning of the season. I hosted a podcast and I said, the Kings have, we found out the secret to the Kings being victorious this season, how they can play their best basketball. It's a refusal to be outworked by their opponent on a nightly basis. Well, that refusal is few and far between, inconsistent, and quite frankly, doesn't happen nearly enough, because the Kings were dominated by Portland in the paint, 64-34, outscored by 30 points in the paint. Again, by one of the worst offensive teams in the league. They lost the second chance points battle 19-12, and they turned the ball over 20 times, leading to 24 Blazers points. These are the type of performances that make you start to talk about jobs. Now, I see it. I interact with it all the time. I love you, Kings fans, and you're not the only fan base that does this. But after every single loss, fans call for jobs. Mike Brown sucks. He needs to be fired. Monty McNair's built a terrible team. He needs to be fired. De'Aaron Fox needs to be kicked off the team. Keegan Murray's terrible. Trade him. Kevin Huerter's not an NBA player. Like, I see it all the time. I see it all the time. And if that's what you need to do to fire it off, to make yourself feel better, that's fine. I expect it. Do your thing. Do what you got to do. Losses like this, especially when they're not new, especially when we've seen them before, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, over the course of a year and some change now. Losses like this continuing to happen makes you go, oh yeah, these conversations about jobs are actually warranted. They actually are, they matter. And I'm telling you, because even if you struggle to believe in Mike Brown or Monty or some of these players, but especially Mike Brown and Monty, your front office and your coaching staff, even if you struggle with some of the decisions you make, I promise you, I'm telling you, and please believe me, you don't want this. You do not want a new coaching carousel. You do not want an inconsistent, unsteady front office. You do not want that dark cloud to come back over this organization, the chaos to resume again that we went through for almost 20 years. You don't want it. That doesn't mean that in fear you hang on to inept coaches and inept front office members. I'm not saying the Kings can't ever fire Mike or Monty out of fear of the past. But we're not at that point yet. I'm telling you, we're not at that point yet. And as much as you might not like the guys or believe in what the guys are doing, I'm telling you, this organization right now is still better off having them and trying to stick this through and trying to figure it out than hitting the big red button, blowing it all up, and starting again. I'm telling you, please believe me. Those of you who have been around for a long time, remember how bad it was. And those of you who are relatively new to Sacramento Kings fandom, I promise you, it is so horrible. And we don't want the Kings to go through that again. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college sports, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. At this point, bet $5 on the Sacramento Kings to hit the under on 3-point shots. You'll win every time, and then you'll get that $150 in bonus bets on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Well, with tonight's loss, the Sacramento Kings were eliminated from the NBA Cup. I'm not saying that I don't care, but at this point, the NBA Cup is like, okay, bummer, that sucks, especially considering the Kings made it out of the group stage last year. Darn it, that would have been fun to compete for that. But can we make sure that the Sacramento Kings aren't getting you've been eliminated from the playoffs weeks before the end of the season? Because at this rate, the Kings are going to be eliminated from playoff contention in the Western Conference like over 2 weeks before the end of the season. We want game 82, 81, 80, 79, 78, 77, 76, 75. We want these games to matter. And at this rate, by the time we reach game 75, the Sacramento Kings, if it still matters, they're going to be scratching and clawing to barely sneak into the play-in. That's where the Kings are at this point. But by the way, just in case you're curious, the Kings were still alive in the NBA Cup going into tonight. What they needed to stay alive was to beat the Portland Trail Blazers. Didn't do that. And you needed the Los Angeles Lakers to lose the Oklahoma City Thunder tonight. Well, they did. OKC beat the Lakers. So that means you quite literally controlled your destiny tonight. You just had to win to stay alive. But you couldn't get your own job done, so, hey, OKC, you did us a solid. Doesn't matter. Just another just another kick in the side, or another reason to be disappointed about this game. So, the $1 million question, I guess, where do we go from here? Where do the Kings go from here? Well, next on the schedule, Sunday, they have a battle against Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs, who the Kings have already lost to, right? We know how dynamic and scary Wemby is. Not to mention Harrison Barnes returning to Sacramento. Harrison Barnes, who was the Western Conference Player of the Week last week. So Harrison Barnes is playing good basketball right now, and you best believe he's got revenge on the mind. And while Harrison Barnes loves and cares for the guys on this team and isn't wishing ill upon them, there is definitely a side of Harrison Barnes that is looking at, since I've been traded, this Kings team talked about, we got DeMar DeRozan, we've upgraded Harrison Barnes, which in my opinion they have, and yet this team is worse. Worse than when he was here. So there's definitely a devil on Harrison Barnes' shoulder, and Harrison is a phenomenal human being. But the competitor in Harrison has a little devil on his shoulder going, yeah, that's right. You got rid of me, and look at you now. So I expect Harrison to play that way. Who knows if it's going to result in anything, but I expect Harrison to play that way. Oh, and then after that, you get the Houston Rockets, a team who not only plays physical and plays hard and is young and exciting, they're also a team that beat the living crap out of you multiple times last season. If you play against the Rockets as soft as you played tonight against Portland, you're going to get run out of your own gym. God, I hope that doesn't happen. Speaking of your own gym, 11 of the next 15 games are being played in Sacramento. Not that that's a good thing, because this Kings team is 4-5 at home and for some reason cannot show an ability to play consistently good basketball in their own building. So why should we believe that's going to change? I hope I'm wrong. I hope the Golden One Center is filled with more beams and cheers than groans and frustration. But this Kings team, even going back to the year they were great at home, they seem to struggle more than on the road. Maybe, I mean, I've said it before, home cooking, you're sleeping in your own bed, right? This is a great opportunity to turn your season around. A lot of home games in the month of December, a lot of time in your own building to figure your crap out. This is a great time to do it, but they have to prove to us that they're capable of doing it. They haven't proven that yet. Honestly, and like we could go through a long laundry list of specific things that the Kings need to do better than, and we are better in. And we talked about a number of them either in this podcast or throughout this season already. The reality is, forget the specifics, simplify it. On the simplest level, the Kings just need to play better, consistent basketball. Just play better basketball and do it on a nightly, beyond that, do it on a quarterly basis, for God's sake. Because minimum 1 quarter a game, the Kings are terrible. And on a night like tonight, they were terrible for 3 quarters. Play good, consistent basketball. Find your identity again, and then start to build these layers back upon it. But if you're incapable of even doing that, finding consistent basketball and good basketball at the simplest form and finding out who you are as a basketball team, if you're incapable of doing that because you're losing too many games, team's cooked, man. I don't know how else to say it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope this team can make me feel a lot better on Sunday against San Antonio. I hope this Kings team can turn it around. Part of me actually expects it. Part of me expects a bounce-back performance from the Kings against the Spurs, because this team has done that a number of times over the last couple of years. Again, after bad losses, they tend to bounce back. I mean, they bounced back with a big win over the Minnesota Timberwolves. Many were calling it their best win of the season that they just had in Minnesota the other night. And then they followed it up with their worst loss of the season tonight. Which version of the Kings will show up in the Golden One Center on Sunday? I don't know, but I'll be there. And if you're going to be there too, let's hang out. Come by, say hi, come see me at the top of section 105 in the media area. Come by and say hi. Would love to chat with you there. And regardless of a win or a loss, I'll have another post-game podcast for you from the Golden One Center. I'm hoping it's a more positive podcast than this. I promise you, I'm a happy person. I enjoy the Kings. I love this team. I love being optimistic, but God, this team makes it difficult sometimes. And they're making it difficult right now. Hopefully they'll get through it, and of course we'll get through it together, rain or shine, here on the Locked On Kings podcast as Kings fans, the most loyal and passionate Kings fans, or I should say sports fans on the planet, and certainly in the NBA. Appreciate your support. Hey, Let your feelings fly. Get loose in the comment section. Hit me up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Even if I don't respond to you, I read everything. Send it to me. I want to hear it. You listen to me, I'll listen to you. Let's talk about it. Hit me up on those platforms. I'll see you on Sunday. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.